Hi, and welcome back to this Monday edition of Focal Point. AFR Talk. Brian Fisher is my name. Great to have you in the conversation. The movie Son of God, by the way, blew away the box office this weekend. $26 million in box office receipts, second only to the Liam Neeson thriller Non-Stop. So there was a lot of discussion, a lot of predictions about how that movie was going to do at the box office. People really did not know. You had predictions all over the map, and it opened gangbusters, 26 million on its opening weekend. That's the movie Son of God. Now, another movie that's coming out in March is a movie called Noah. We've talked about it a little bit before, but I came across a column this morning in Christianity Today by Jerry Johnson, Dr. Jerry Johnson. He's the president of the NRB. That's the National Religious Broadcasters. And he says, look, there are some positives in this movie. And there's a companion column to this, 5 positive features about this film. And there are good things about this film. God is a player. There's at least a nod to the biblical account and so forth. But Jerry Johnson says, look, if you go to this movie, and I'm not saying don't go see it, but if you go to the movie, be aware that there are some negative features about this Noah movie. Number one, he says, look, the figure Noah doesn't even ring true from what we read about him in the scriptures. Noah in the movie, according to Jerry Johnson, obsesses on the idea that the race of mankind should not survive. Now, that's not what Genesis was about, or the flood was about. The flood was about giving man a fresh start. God wanted mankind to survive, but man had made such a hash out of civilization, such a hash out of society, that he wanted to give man a fresh start, a clean start. That's what the flood was really all about. But in the movie, he obsesses with the idea that man shouldn't even live, and he gets to the point where he raises a knife over his twin daughters to kill them just so that they can't reproduce little tiny noxious weeds called human beings. So that's clearly different than the figure you read about in the scripture. Remember, he is described as the most righteous man in his generation. And then Jerry Johnson also points out how overdone the environmental agenda is in this movie. Here's one paragraph. While showing images of war, violence, theft, and sexual sin, the main evil of humankind in the movie, according to Noah, the movie, is the abuse of the environment. Man has been guilty of a scorched earth policy brought about by primitive industrialization. That, believe it or not, is the plot line in the movie. And Jerry Johnson makes the point, if you go to Genesis and the account of what precipitated the flood, you won't find any mention of harm to the environment anywhere. There's no mention about hunting. There's no mention about mining. It is all about violence to other human beings. And therefore, he says, the environmental agenda seems pretty phony. One other thing is it features basically theistic evolution. There are some visuals that are featured in connection with the creation account which show primitive species morphing again and again into more sophisticated creatures. And again, if you look at the biblical account, more highly advanced life forms came into being fully formed by the creative hand of God. Now, Cecile Richards is the president of Planned Parenthood. This is Soundbite A8, Jeff. And number to call, by the way, is 888-589-8840. Planned Parenthood is linked up with the Girl Scouts of America, as you are aware. Girl Scouts basically partners with Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood has a new video out that promotes, if you're ready for this, promotes sadomasochism and bondage, sexual behaviors to teenagers. And it proposes rules in this video that's targeted at teenagers. This is Planned Parenthood in partnership. Girl Scouts of America partner with them. They're partnered together in this deal to make bondage and sadomasochism, quote, fun and safe for teenagers. So this is for National Kink Month. The video is hosted by Lacey Green, who says this: people sometimes think that those who practice BDSM, that's bondage and sadomasochism, are emotionally scarred or were once abused. Not true. It's a total myth. BDSM relies upon and creates trust. So that's what this video is all about. And of course, Planned Parenthood is primarily about abortion. 97% of everything they do is abortion procedures. They got close to $1.5 billion of your money and mine over the last 4 years. Now here's Cecile Richards, former president of Planned Parenthood, and she's asked in this interview a very good question. This, I believe, is with Univision. So when it comes to the abortion issue, a very appropriate question to ask is, when does life begin? Listen to Cecile Richards' answer to that question. Former president of Planned Parenthood.
So for you, when does life start? When does a human being become a human being?
This is a question that I think will be debated through the centuries, and people come down to very different points of view.
But for you, what's that point?
It is not something that I feel like is really part of this conversation. Mm-hmm. I mean, to me, we work with women. I guess the way I'd really like to I think every woman has to make her own decision. What we do at Planned Parenthood is make sure that women have all their options for health care, mm-hmm. and that they have the option to have a healthy pregnancy. They have an option to put a child up for adoption if they decide to carry a pregnancy to term, or they have the right to make a decision to terminate a pregnancy.
But why would it be so controversial for you to say, when do you think life starts?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if it's controversial. I don't know that it's really relevant to the conversation. But I mean, for me, I'm a mother of 3 children. For me, life began when I delivered them. They've been probably the most important thing in my life ever since. Mm-hmm. But that was my own personal decision.
Well, it's interesting to me. She says, look, it's not relevant. This issue of when life begins is not relevant to this discussion. Well, it's very relevant to babies. That's Cecile Richards, former president of Planned Parenthood. Well, let's see. And she is the president. She's not former. She is the president of Planned Parenthood. So that is Cecile Richards. You know, and speaking of the Girl Scouts and their partnership with Planned Parenthood, they've been trying to deny that, but it's very clearly the reality that they've been partnered with them. The Boy Scouts of America got a hard dose of reality this week. Disney cut off their funding for Boy Scout troops. The Disney World did not send money to Boy Scout headquarters, but they did cut off any funds to local troops that would do volunteer projects, and then Disney would donate money to their local scout troops in honor of these projects that they did, and Disney has cut them completely off at the knees. And just as a reminder of something that we've often observed about the gay lobby is nothing is ever enough with these people. Nothing is ever enough. There is no amount of surrender. There is no amount of capitulation. There is no amount of concession that you can make that will satisfy them. Because the Boy Scouts foolishly thought that they could get big gay off of their backs, get the load off of their backs by agreeing to allow homosexuals into the scouting program. They still drew the line at having homosexuals serve as scoutmasters, in part perhaps because they know that homosexual males offend against children at about 11 times the rate, 10 to 11 times the rate of heterosexual men. So they obviously have a sacred trust to protect the sexual health and integrity of the Boy Scouts that are in their program, and they might have been aware of that. And they've had instances of male homosexuals molesting scouts. I mean, it has happened. One of the black eyes of the scouting movement, the places where that's happened, they don't want to repeat that. Well, Big Gay says, look, that's not enough. Unless you allow homosexual males, even though they might be pedophiles, unless you allow them to be scout leaders, we're going to cut you off at the knees. Fox News has a story about the alternative to the Boy Scouts called Trail Life USA and how it is finding its footing, it's getting rooted, and it is growing. So that alternative, the Boy Scouts Trail Life USA, is doing just fine. Thank you very much, as Fox News points out. Let's go back to the phones. Let's grab a call from Lewis in Houston, Texas. Lewis, welcome to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. What's on your mind?
Hey, Brian. I wanted to ask you about an incident that happened in Canada. First, I wanted to mention, you mentioned the movie with Liam Neeson, Nonstop.
Oh, yeah. You can talk about who the bad guys are in that movie?
Yes, I actually was looking forward to it, but when I found out that I will not go see that movie, I will not give Hollywood my money.
Well, tell us, Lewis, and it'd be good for people. This is a spoiler alert, but I'm perfectly content to provide this spoiler alert because it nauseates me. Tell us why you won't go see it, Lewis.
Because in the end, we find out that the bad guy is a veteran of the U.S. forces. He is a conservative, and the good guy, quote unquote, who is very helpful, is a Muslim in Muslim garb.
Yeah, that's an amazing thing to me, Lewis, in that movie. I mean, the only really good guy that helps him out is a Muslim guy, and then the bad guy is a returned vet. I mean, this is exactly the scenario that Janet Napolitano painted. Of course, it's not true. It's not even remotely true, but that's the myth that they want to paint. And so, pretty nauseating. I mean, I agree with people that are upset about that. Anyway, Lewis, go ahead. What do you want to say?
Okay, there was an incident that happened recently in Canada. I got an article. It was I don't remember what Post newspaper it was, but basically I hadn't verified the story. It's supposed to be true. A lesbian in Canada walked into a Muslim barber and wanted a haircut, but because of his religious beliefs, he said, I can't cut your hair. We can't touch any woman but our own wife. And so she went and wanted to. I don't know, file a suit or something against him, and so a local group of these equal opportunity, I don't know what they're called, but basically they are now supposed to decide, some kind of human rights agency is supposed to decide what's going to happen. And the point I want to make is something like this is bound to happen in America, and the Muslims' faith is going to go up against the homosexual rights, quote unquote. And we're going to find out where the left is really coming from. Because we already know that they're not acknowledging Christian rights.
Yeah, and you're right. They are going to have to make a decision. I got a story today where Iran executed 2 homosexuals. So this is part and parcel of Muslim theology, the death penalty for homosexuality. Our desire is to see homosexuals get help. We would like to see them be able to receive reparative therapy, just like we want to help drug users recover from their addiction. That's what we want for homosexuals, but not Islam. They want to cut their heads off or hang them by the neck till dead. Focal Point AFR Talk.